mission, vision, promise to our users, and this thing called a strategy map, which had our strategic objectives in it, to get feedback and just to let people understand the process that we were going through to go through this. So we had another one in March to let people know what we had got to so far. So what have we seen out of this? Where are we saying our directions are? And again, get another round of feedback. So by April, we were sort of at the end point of this and writing up our report to campus. So what it took in terms of involvement, and as I said, I wanted to focus a little bit on this. If you want people to buy in, you need to involve them. And this was, again, really fundamental when we started this project up, was who is going to be taking part in this. So our steering group was actually an existing group. It's the top-level University Committee on Information Systems and Technology, USIS, so they already were in place. It was actually augmented by a couple more people, but they're a steering group to say, this is where we're going, and they were the people that took on the strategy map, this thing that I'll show you later. We formed an executive advisory committee, so this was our way of tying up into the upper levels of the campus administration. There were 7 people. We only met with them 3 times. But it was really, really great to have that overview of what the campus needed and what their vision of what we were doing was, to just kind of give us that feedback. That was really critical. And of course, to get feedback up into our overall university strategic plan that was going on at the same time. So those linkages are just really critical. And it's going to help us down the road because those people know that we've been listening to the overall plan at the same time as going through our plan. And you always hear about, they're going to link it back up to what the overall objectives are. We are, right joined at the hip with that. So it's been a really good, as I said, timing for us as well. The task force, though, is my favorite committee. And this was a group of 24 people who showed up pretty much weekly throughout the 8 months of this project. And so they were seconded to take part upwards to a day. We would usually meet for an hour and a half. Sometimes we extended that if we were really trying to have a working session, but then they would do homework in between. And they were a terrific group, a mix of faculty member, a couple of students, one undergrad, one grad. Then we had people from all of the faculty areas. They might be IT within that area, they might be admin, they might be other staff members, they might be a faculty member. And then we had representatives from some of the key administrative areas. So as I say, 24 people that got together, and whatever we threw at them, they really took on and they really tried to attack it. And a lot of it was new to them. Looking at indicators was very new to them. Looking at some of the strategy, overall strategy planning was very new to them. They were the ones who got down and dirty with the data that we were getting from all these consultations, looking at it in teams and trying to surface the things that were coming out of it, to look through the actual transcripts of what we heard and saying, okay, these are the common things that are coming out of it. So there's a lot of work done here and just a fabulous group for that. And they really loved it. And they said that it was a great exercise. They met people from all across campus and they looked at things in a new light that they had not been looking at before. So I just can't emphasize enough the value of that kind of participation for the individuals, and then they take it back and they talk to others in their areas. Some of those people were then involved with their strategic planning, and so they knew what we were doing and how we were approaching it and whether or not that worked with them. So it's this lovely snowball effect. And then there was the central IT management, so the department that I come from, keeping them informed on what's happening and getting feedback from them. And then another group that is the IT managers from various areas across campus. So that was sort of our overall picture of who was involved in governing this project. So in a diagram, you can see here sort of where things fit together. And as I said, and there somehow I can make this light up. I'm not sure what you pressed to do that, but anyway, don't worry about it. The USIS committee was an existing committee, as I said. The executive advisory group was new, just for the duration of the project, and also the task force for the duration of the project. So what else it took in terms of resources? Myself as a project leader, I was seconded for 3 days a week in the fall, 1.5 days per week in the spring, and I can tell you right now it's 8 days per week. This became a very consuming project, and you have to let some other things slide, but I must say that, I'm a runner, and when I'm running, I hate running. I never want to run again when I'm running. So can I just get this over with? As soon as I stop running, I love running. I can't wait to go for the next run. It's one of those types of things, because when you're in the middle of it, it's so painful. But when you get to the end of it, you just so much appreciate what you've just been through. So I think it's one of those kinds of things. Our sponsor, our CIO, was there right alongside as well. I mean, he was taking on a lot of things, being new to the campus, but he was very much involved and invested in this process, which was terrific for us. And then the logistical stuff, I mean, as you know, you're trying to get 24 people together every week. You've got all these other committees. You're trying to do these consultations. You're trying to take minutes. You're trying to record the sessions in terms of what the transcripts for those were. You got the website. You got the communications at the campus. It's just a lot. So don't underestimate what goes on there. In terms of additional expertise, I think one of the things that we did well was to get an external consultant for the strategic planning tool. There's sort of some suspicion, especially amongst a lot of academics, about having some of these strategy tools, you know, all of the stuff that you can hear from the business world that people are a little bit suspicious of in areas of campus. So we had somebody come from the outside to facilitate this process, and she was really good. She got people talking about things. She would challenge them back when they challenged her about the approach to things. And she said, let's just try this. And it actually worked really well. And again, it brought that team, the USIS team, our steering group, together on that. And then within the university, and this is something that we often get asked about is, you know, how are you using your local expertise? And we actually were able to do this. The professor who was involved in the task force was, what part of his area of study is indicators. He works with the health sector. So indicators are a big thing there, measurements. So that's been great for us. And also he had done some strategy work before as well. We also had a professor who does qualitative analysis in vivo, if you know the analysis system. She took the consultation data and she did an analysis. As I said, we were sort of getting the task force to dig through that to see what was in it, to surface things. But then she took it from a much more objective approach and put it through, and as she says, you know, see what the data says itself. And so that also gave us some information back from that data. Institutional analysis and planning staff member was involved, and she was very involved with the university planning exercise, going out on the consultations and then doing the analysis on data. So again, a really good link there. And then of course, our CIO, Dave Wallace, is from the city of Toronto. I don't know if you hear anything about the city of Toronto up here, but it was interesting times, I'm sure, then as well. In terms of participants from across campus, these consultations, they were usually at least an hour long. We would give them an overview of what we were doing, what we had come up with to date, let them understand a little bit about that strategy that we were putting together, the strategy map we were putting together, and then ask the questions and just let them talk. So we also had an online survey, same set of questions, so that people could respond that way, and we had about 140 responses back from that. And then we had the 2 open houses, which I've already mentioned. So the consultations, when we started to have a few consultations under our belt and started to look at what was coming out of those, we had some themes arriving. And these were not necessarily surprises in many ways, because they're the types of things that you have been hearing about if you're listening to your clients at all anyway. Address usability. So some of the big applications that are used every day by some people in the administrative areas, they have no problem with them. But it's the professor who needs to do some kind of financial crunching once a month or once a term, and spends half a day doing it because the application just it is not intuitive for him or her. So a lot of those kinds of usability issues came back to us. The IT environment for students on campus. Waterloo is known for its technology. Students come to Waterloo with expectations, and we need to know that we're meeting those expectations and hopefully surpassing those. And we don't believe that we always are. So that's something that we really want to look at. Our learning environment, of course, is something that there's a big focus on. Then the business management tools. One of the big things we heard about was data. We need to get data, we need to have good, clean data, we need to have our systems working back and forth so that data can be shared between them, because everybody needs it in order to do their own local planning. and to have their own measurements. And so this was a real focus when we, that was maybe for me one of the more of the surprising things, is I just thought that people had access to what they needed, and it was not necessarily the case. Service-oriented help desks. So we have central help desks, and then there are help desks all across campus. How do we get more integrated? And so we are looking at some of the ITIL processes to pull together some of our help desks and our practices around helping our clients. Improving communications. You can't go out and ask people about anything without them talking about improved communications. And I've already mentioned our governance. And I was really interested to hear Ghislaine speaking this morning at the Enterprise Architecture session about having this federated model and service level agreements, and that's something that we're looking at. So I'd love to talk to her about that as well. So we had all this information. And in February, I was panicking because we had great data. We had these themes that were emerging. We had possible initiatives that the task force was surfacing. We had projects that we already had. We knew some of the things we needed to do, and we had this other analysis of the data. And so I went to the steering committee and said, I guess the magic happens here, but how do we get to the next process? How do we know what actually has come out? How do we make sense out of all of this that has come out of the project so far? So the bad news is it is magic. The good news is it's magic that we can all perform, because it's that you're just churning through things, you're discussing things, you're talking about priorities, you're doing those iterative rounds. And what I found that I was doing was I was coming up with something. I said, I think this is what we're saying now. And they said, no, that's nothing like what we're saying now. So I go back and I try again, and I say, I think that this is more like it, and you just go through this process. So at the end of it, we came up with a 4-page directions document. So this is our first deliver, and so this is what we're saying, this is the areas that we need to focus on over the next little while. And so out of that, our directions really focus on revitalizing our student IT environment. And so when we say that, we're talking about things like giving students the type of information that they need in the way that they need it. So we haven't had a student portal, and so we're starting to look at student portal, and in fact to have a really nice prototype in place. And I think it's going to be a step way beyond where we would have been if we'd tried to do this a few years back without the kind of information that we have now. It's also about student labs. I mean, we all go with this process through student labs. Are we ever going to put in another student lab? No, we don't need to. Oh yeah, we do. And so again, we need to understand where we're going with student labs. So that whole environment. Our technology enabled learning, I mean, you're all going through this as well. That's one of the things that was coming out of the university plan, is a focus on that. So we need to know, as IT enablers, how we actually help that whole process. The IT foundations, that's a huge area, but even with our data center, we need a revitalized data center. We need to be able to grow our data center. We need to know that when the power goes out to the math building, the main data center doesn't go down. Those are fundamental things that you really need to be focusing on. And then that usability and delivery of IT, so through our help desk and understanding what usable applications mean. So for each of those areas, I said we have these potential opportunities that we need to prioritize next, find out what's important to us, where we're going to go next. What can get done and when, and have owners and resources. So the strategy map that I mentioned, this is one that we hired the external consultant to help us on, and establishing those fundamental things about your vision, mission, and so on, and these objectives. So what I want to show you that is it's really supposed to be your strategy in one picture, so we've got a good strategy, we don't have a good picture. So you're not going to be able to read that from back there. So, and it's all on our website, you'll be able to go back to it. So I just want to talk a little bit about what this is. So it does have our mission and our vision and our promise to our users and our core values at the top and bottom of those. It's the colored areas in between that are what I was getting at in terms of our strategic objectives. As I say, these are not things to do, they're not projects. They're really what we want to be for our campus users. And again, we agreed upon this with a collective. It wasn't the central department, it was with a collective across campus. And so if you look at the top yellow part, that's for our users. And the main one there is empower our users and optimize their experience. So when we're looking at things to do, we need to look at our map and say, is what we're trying to do, is that going to help to empower our users and optimize their experience? And in particular, for a particular area of our users, is it going to enable the optimization of administrative processes across campus or the achievement of research and scholarship objectives? So that's our user area. And then in terms of our internal processes, does it help us to understand the needs of our users? Does it help us to be easy to do business with for our users? Is it taking a structured approach to IT? So these, as you can see, these are all fundamental things to understand. Is the way we're approaching IT for our users on campus appropriate? So the middle area, as I said, the internal processes for IT, and then there's organizational capabilities. Are we taking a university-wide approach? And as I said, a few years back, we started on some of these consolidation projects, because each of the faculties, and you've all been through this, had their own email servers as example. And so consolidating into one, that's taking a university-wide approach. So again, these are ways that we can check and see if we're doing the right types of things. So how do we do it? We're taking out those potential opportunities, and we're going up through our strategic map, our strategic objectives, and saying, how do we map in? If there's something that you're saying you're doing, or want to do, think that you should do, if it doesn't hit any of your strategic objectives, then you do have to question whether or not it's appropriate to be doing it. But also, since this is our first pass at the strategic objectives, it may be pointing out that there's a flaw in those. So it's a good exercise to see if you're going to continue to use this map, use it and see how it fits for what you're trying to accomplish. So people are mapping up business cases to our strategic objectives, and it also helps us to understand how we're fitting up into the UW plan with our strategic objectives. So here's an example with the University of Waterloo strategic plan coming out, and I mean, I'm instructional technology, so my examples tend to come into that space, but there's providing leading edge technology-enabled learning is overall university goal. So how we feed up into that is we have some of those potential opportunities that are establishing governance for university technology-enabled directions. That's one thing we don't have. So I, as an instructional technologies group, have lots of people come to me and say, couldn't we put in this technology? Couldn't we put in that technology? Won't you support this kind of new thing that's going on out there? And so I can speak to what we sort of know about already, and I can speak to whether or not we have capacity to do it, but how are we fitting that into where we want to go with technology-enabled learning on campus? If we don't have that kind of governance set up, that decision-making for what's important for where we want to take technology-enabled learning, do we really want to grow a lot in the fully online space, or do we want to do more of the blended courses? You know, what is our direction on campus, so that I can now say, okay, I know where we're going, so I know what we should be focusing on in terms of technologies. It just makes sense. So that was one thing, and then providing avenues for faculty and students to have input on our new technologies. You know, how is that feedback loop going? We hear a lot about some things that people want, but how do we make that into an organized process? And then working with Desire to Learn to build out an exciting online space. So those are some of the things, some of the ways coming out of our plan that we fit back up into the university plan. So I'll get into some of the lessons, and these are not necessarily in any kind of prioritized order. They're just some of the things that came out of this. We were in the midst of moving to a new web content management system at the same time as this project started up, so we were trying to get some support for starting up our website so that we could have an interactive website. And I really wish that we could have had it up earlier so that we could point people to it, because we were stashing stuff in SharePoint and trying to create pages over here and so on. So just getting your website up early so that you have a place for people to go for more information, and hopefully a way for them to input into the process as well. The participation I've talked a lot about, and our users, as I said, we had people calling us to say, you haven't talked to us yet. Once they knew that this process was going on, they really did want to be involved in it. So just getting out there and going into their space and asking questions about what their experiences are is, of course, invaluable. We tend to, I mean, it's harder, and you hear things that you don't necessarily like to hear, but it's one of the most valuable parts of this process. And as I've already said, the huge benefits from having the involvement on the governance groups and the groups that are doing the work on this project, because you get so many different perspectives coming into it. Involving experts and understanding when that external view on things and that person that doesn't have baggage with the rest of your IT on campus is really, really valuable as well. And the one thing we found is that if we kept layering on what we had heard so far as we went out to the next consultation, then that was good for people to hear, and they knew that they could either build upon what you had already been saying, or else said, you haven't even talked at all about this, and there was a whole new area. But you could use that hour and a half that you had with them really, really fruitfully, because you were telling them what you've already heard, and then they could build on that. And I've already mentioned that we just don't measure well, and that's going to be a really, really big thing for us to start those measurements. There's not a culture of planning everywhere, so when you go out to do this, sometimes it's just not, the nature of what the people have been doing before, so you're getting very minuscule kind of things about, on that page, on that application, like that button doesn't really work the way I want. And I mean, that's not what you're looking for, but it's all input in there, it's all giving a voice to people. The timing for our plan was great because of the Waterloo plan coming together at the same time. And reorganizing our department at the same time seemed crazy when we started out. How can you start that process when you don't know where you're going to go? But because we had that process started in advance, we're well on the way to understanding what we need to do in terms of a reorganization for the central IT department. Now, one of the things that we said was very important, and which we haven't put in a process for yet, and if people here have ideas about how you're going about that, is how to make this a living document. So we've gone out, we've done the consultations, we've really had a lot of user involvement, we've told people what we've done along the way, we've told people what the results of those are, but now how do we continue to live that? So one of the things is we have that task force. We sort of disbanded, but I want to keep them informed so that they are still those conduits out into their areas and can be talking back to us about what they're hearing, about what we're putting out there for a plan. But I think that's one of the things that becomes difficult. So we're going to try to use some of the new tools. CIO Dave has got a blog going, so some of the topics that come out of the plan we'll put out there in terms of a blog posting so that people can respond to it. We'll have more open houses, but I think that this is something that is going to be the difficult part, is how do we make a refreshment of this plan. The steering group is going to be, I think, core to that, because once we get measures in place, somebody has to look at those measures and sort of do a review of measures. Those can be input into the steering group, and then they can review where the plan is. We have to look at the composition of the steering group and see if it's appropriate for our future. So those are a couple things that still need to get done, and we'll be reporting back to our campus about that. So that's just a summary of what we've talked about, the process, who we involved, how we collected data, what development tools we used, how other things may affect the plan, like the overall university plan and our reorganization, and about the living document. So I would welcome questions, and my first one was about the logo. Did anybody else see that? I wasn't sure of that little hooded guy. I really looked like an alien. But then I recognized the tag.
Let's reward those people who
oh, excellent. Okay. All right. So I will tell us more about your portal path. I don't think that's for us.
What surprised you during your consultations, other than Greg?
Oh, yes. Okay. I guess, I mean, there's lots of things that came up in terms of the consultations, in terms of what people wanted to talk about, but I think really the thing that surprised me the most was that the people wanted to do it. They really wanted to be in front of us and talking about what their experiences were. I guess the thing, the thing that just rose to the top, and it was funny because so many different consultations we had this, was the financial system. And in particular, one user-facing part of the financial system, and it just kept coming up as usability issues all over the place. So usability was just a really, really big part of the results. Yeah.
We have a question. Tell us more about your portal path and how that meets your student priorities. That sounds like a fun discussion.
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, it's, I don't know that we have a demo of it up on our website. It's being homegrown, and it's really looking at, of course, pulling in data from various sources. So they're looking at the API, the interface to the learning management system, and trying to bring out of that, when are things due, when are your courses being held in what rooms. Like they're trying to bring out as much data as they can so that it makes the type of interface that the student can just live day to day by. So what is the food in the student cafeterias across campus today? The oddest one was, I don't know if you know about the goose problem maybe it's a problem, maybe it's not. We have a lot of geese on campus. They're nesting. When they're nesting, they're really, really aggressive. So somebody went around and actually got the GPS location for all of the geese locations, and then somebody wrote an app around it, and that's part of our portal, so that if you're going across campus, you can direct yourself around the geese if you don't like geese attacks. So it's going to be a really great portal in the end of it.
And your measurements, what measurements are you putting in place and what tools will be used?
Yeah. As I said, measurements are a really difficult one. We're not doing a lot of measurements. So what we are doing is looking at all those strategic objective areas and trying to define how we might measure that. So how are we doing, for example, with being easy to do business with? How are we doing with empowering our users? So something like empowering our users and optimizing the experience, we might just be starting with a satisfaction survey. With our RT, or request tracker ticket system, we have a survey at the end of that. Did we do a good job with this particular request? So trying to build in where we have got some data, and then adding new data because where we don't have it.
So we've got another one here about setting objectives. Where was that?
Oh, okay, the top one there, yeah. Collecting and vetting strategic objectives. So it's not so much collecting. This was again done with the external consultant, and really what she was trying to get from us is, what are the things that you do for your users? And as you saw on that map, that's what it's about. It's about our processes. It's about how we interact with our users. It's about how we decide to spend our money and put people effort into things, and about how we're organized. And so those were the main themes around it, and she had given those themes in advance, and then we really spoke about what was important to us at Waterloo in terms of addressing those themes. So as I said, they're not things to do, they're not projects, they're not initiatives, they're really about how we operate.
How about some live questions?
Maybe some of those were live questions, and just nobody wanted to put up their hand here.
Anyway.
Oh, yeah.
What about your town hall? What did you talk about and how?
How was it attended? Yeah. Okay, so at the town hall, at the first one in December, we had that strategy map, or at least a first pass of it. And so we put it up there and just got people to give us feedback on what they thought of in terms of the types of things that we were trying to be for campus. And so people would say something like, how does accessibility fit into your map? And we would just discuss some of the things about what was or was not missing from the map. And one of the things, for example, that came out of that was just your ongoing maintenance, your sort of operations, how does that fit into the map? And that was one thing that, it may need tweaking for. So just getting that kind of feedback. The other thing we discussed at the December meeting was prioritization. So we actually used this as a workshop. We got people in the room and then we said, you're going to have to do some work while you're here. And so prioritization, we got them to talk about in smaller groups. Why are we going to do something? What would make it a higher priority? What are some of the things that we need to consider? So if it's mandated by the government, or it's a security issue, or it's something to do with our university priorities, that might bump it up in terms of priority. So we really got them to just do some thinking around that. And then at the second one, we were really talking about the directions. So these are the areas of focus that we think that we need to have initially. And so what do people think about that? So again, we just kind of got them to do a bit of a workshop there. And I think that works really well to get them involved in the process.
Who was that?
Oh, so there, we just put it out open, and we had people sign up. So we had I think only one faculty member attend the first one, maybe two the second one. Faculty members are very difficult to get out to these types of things, so that when we did the consultations, wherever we could get into an existing meeting that the faculty members had, we would try to address it that way. But it was a cross-section of people. There was a lot of IT people that showed up because they wanted to know what was coming up out of this. So it was a bit of a mix.
The last slide question in the middle there, we have a few more on the wall.
Okay, yes. Yeah.
Can you just talk a little bit more how you align your process with the university-wide strategic plan?
Sure. Yeah, so the university-wide strategic plan was happening. It had started a process, like I said, about the year before, with a lot of consultations, and then they were coming up with data that came out of that. But it's only within the last month that they have come out to campus with, this is the campus strategic plan, and had some goals identified in that. So there were 8 areas identified in that, and then within each of their areas, they had specific things that they thought they needed to address. So it was sort of very much in parallel with what we were doing with the IT strategic plan. So as I gave in that example, we're looking at what are the things that they say that we need to be doing as a campus, technology-enabled learning as one of them, and then what did we already identify that fits up into that. So that was the mapping of what we had already come up with and what goes up into that. What we're now also going to have to do is look at this, the campus strategic plan and say, are there things that we're missing that feed up into this? At the same time, all the faculties are coming up with their strategic plans. A lot of the administrative areas across campus are coming up with theirs. So this was a campus-wide process. So bringing all that stuff together it's very messy, but we do start to see where we are aligning, and then we need to identify where we're not.
I think we'll end on time at 11:50. Thank you very much, Andrew Chappell, University of Waterloo, and after Andrea, we'll stay a few minutes just to questions.
Thank you.